Kia ora and hello friends, welcome back to the Restoring Connections podcast. Matthew Dawson here, and we are diving into all manner of topics around the healing and the strengthening of our most important relationships. Yep, not every relationship can be equal in importance. We are specifically talking about the kind of relationships that you want to last your whole life. The relationships that you want to endure through incredibly painful, difficult situations that I don't want you to go through, but you probably will. If you are, like me, a human being on planet Earth, you're going to go through some tough times. And so these are the things that we have observed are really, really important for helping a relationship get through the toughest of times. We're talking about personal responsibility, first and foremost. I'm responsible for my half of this connection. Proactive care, which means I'm going to feed this connection. And powerful communication, which means I'm going to use my ability to communicate to guide this connection forward. And healthy boundaries, which means I am going to protect the connection. I'm going to manage myself well to protect the connection between us. So we're trying out some new gear, a little bit, well, kind of a new setup with our audio and our visual. So shout out to Nate Stevenson and Mike Lefebvre for helping us keep things hopefully looking good, sounding good, doing our best. We are in episode 4 of a 4-part series called What If I Look Like The? Which is a big, big topic. You know, something that we all, I think, have to wrestle with in one way or, or another. We're different in what we're nervous, occasionally about how others might perceive us. But the fact that we are what brings us together, what we have in common is, I think, that all of us, at certain times wrestle with fears and anxieties around how our behavior is perceived. And we gotta wrestle with it, because there are times in a relationship where there is something that needs to be done, that's something that you need to do in order to manage your half of that relationship well, that might be perceived in a particular way. So it's the healthy thing to do, but it is not going to be perceived by someone, in the way that you want it to be perceived. It's not, or maybe you have no idea how it's going to be perceived, but you're afraid of how it might be perceived, right? So we talked about looking like the bad guy, or at least the fear of looking like the bad guy. Some of us wrestle a lot with that. What if I look like the weak one, right? Maybe you grew up in a context where you were always feeling like the weak one, and now as an adult, you are working really, really hard to make sure that no one ever perceives you in that way. But man, that's exhausting. And then we talked about what if I look like the idiot? Maybe the people who you grew up with behaved in a way, there's no comment on them necessarily. It's not necessarily a judgment on them, but the net result was that you constantly felt inferior intellectually. You felt like an idiot, and so now you've got this vow on the inside, to never look like the idiot. And you've always got to be right all the time, which can be really impeding for a healthy connection when the right thing to do is acknowledge that you got it wrong, that your facts weren't right, that actually you just need to apologize. Apologizing is such a wonderful, wonderful thing. Say it with me, friends. Hey, I'm sorry. That wasn't cool. I'm going to work on that. Just want you to get to the point where those words just roll off your tongue. Now, I'm not, so many of us are we veer in one of two extremes. On the one hand, it's like, I can't apologize. I can't show weakness, because if I show weakness, if I acknowledge that I got it wrong, then what? I don't know, fill in the blank for yourself. That feels like a slippery slope for you, maybe. It's like, man, if If I start apologizing, holy moly, I'm just going to get eaten for breakfast. I don't know. What's on the line for you? The other extreme is I'm constantly apologizing, but never really apologizing authentically. I'm always, oh, I'm sorry if this, and I'm sorry if that, and or maybe passive aggressive. Oh, I'm sorry if you, blah, 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 you know. And that's not really meaningful either. Somewhere in the middle there is the ability to own your stuff, and also the willingness to, you know, ask someone else to own their stuff, and to be able to occasionally, when it's necessary, to be able to say, hey, I got that wrong. I need to work on that. I used to say to Cora in the earlier part of our marriage, I used to say stuff like, oh, yeah, totally, I get it. Yeah, no, I'll never do that again. And she'd look at me like, yeah, but you probably will. And I said, well, what do you want me to say? And she goes, maybe you could just say something like, I'll work on it. And I go, oh, okay, yeah. Actually, no, that probably is better. So nowadays we say that to each other a lot, you know. Yep, I hear you, darling. I hear you, babe. You know, or with our team, yep, I hear you. I'll work on it. I am gonna work on that. I own that. I'm gonna work on it. So today we are looking at what if I look like the difficult one. This one comes up quite a lot. And often, not necessarily always the case, but often it's the case, someone who has in their childhood has a sense of, or and as an adult now looks back at their childhood with a sense of shame around causing your family lots and lots of difficulty. You know, you're kind of the problem child, right? That's kind of the phrase. I would never call you that, but maybe that's the lie in your head that's kind of working you all the time. I don't want to be a problem, right? Or maybe you grew up in an environment where one of your siblings was a quote unquote problem child, right? Yeah, I don't want to say that anymore. I hate that actually. But it's the stuff that rolls around in our heads, eh? And you kind of perhaps made a bit of a vow on the inside, I'm never going to be like that, you know, because that is so wrong, that's so immature, that's so ridiculous, and I'll never be that person. I'm never going to be the problem person, right? And then you're in a situation where you are actually feeling hurt, or you're burning out, or, you know, you're stressed out of your mind, or something, I don't know, something's not going right, and you're caught between this reality where you want to be stronger than you are. You want to be okay. You want everything to be fine. And it's so important to you to not be perceived as being difficult. You're just, everything in you wants to display yourself as being competent, and everything in you wants to send the message to the people around you, hey, I got this. You can depend on me. There's just one problem. You don't have this. They can't depend on you. You don't have capacity. Things are unraveling. Things are not going well. And life is catching up with you. And actually what's healthy in this moment is to be communicating, hey guys, time out. I'm actually not okay, right? I'm not okay. This is a huge one for me because I'm a classic, you know, Enneagram 3 achiever type. I hate displaying, you know, weakness. Actually, I don't know if I can say that anymore. I think I've come a long ways in this area, but like in my natural personality, this has been very difficult. So I've had to work really hard at being okay with this, right? Maybe there's an arrangement between you and a particular person, maybe an employer or maybe a team member or maybe your spouse or maybe a child or a romantic partner, and you're realizing this arrangement is not working, right? You've probably heard me say a lot, there's no such thing as a toxic person, just a toxic arrangement. And so maybe realizing the arrangement needs to change. It's become untenable, but it's just you're so concerned about being perceived as being difficult. That is just anathema to you. Like, oh, I don't want to be seen as being difficult. Well, then this episode is for you. We are talking about how we overcome that fear, right? When it's healthy to actually communicate the truth of what's going on. So, as we did with the other ones, we're diving through this same sort of grid. First and foremost, who am I accountable to? So who is again, if you're accountable to no one, if you don't have a mentor, you don't have and I'm not just talking about your boss, I'm talking about who are you accountable to for the quality of your relationships, like your character, how you're growing as an individual, who is coaching you, guiding you, speaking into your life, right? Because if you have no one in that role in your life, then you're trying your best to do that for yourself. And then that's where things get really confusing really quick, because you're trying to navigate all of that, sound judgment and trying to have wisdom, trying to see everything objectively. But man, that is really difficult. You're not going to see yourself through an objective lens. And so it's really helpful. My question, of course, is who are you accountable to? Who gets to tell me that I have my head up my bum and I just need to let it go, right? So who gets to tell me that when I'm afraid about being the difficult person? Who do I process that with? Who do I unpack what I'm going through with? Who could tell me one of either extreme? Either, hey Matt, honestly, bro, like you are being difficult, actually. Like, that seems really unnecessary. I actually don't think that has anything to do with that person. I actually think this is probably more of a you thing that needs to be worked on, and I need to be able to. Who has the ability to communicate that to me, and I will really take that on board. And then the opposite: who in my life who have I given the authority to say, hey Matt, I know you're trying to do the right thing here. I know you're trying to look like you've got it all together. I know you're trying to make sure that the people around you, hopefully they put it in a positive light like this. I know you're trying to be dependable for the people around you. Your heart's in the right place. You don't want to let people down. But Matt, what about the pillar of truth in the relationship? What about the reality that actually you are going to let them down? That's what's coming. It's not working. Like, you can't sustain this pace that you're in. This is not actually going well. The fruit ain't good, Matt. It's getting a little stinky. Who's got the ability to speak that into my life? So, of course, we always start with that. Number one, who am I accountable to? Next up, whose judgment am I afraid of, right? Who is the first person in my life to make me feel like I'm too difficult to love? Or maybe who's the person in my life who treated someone else in a way that created this vow inside of me, like in order to be worthy of love, I have to not be difficult. Maybe you had a dad who, if you or one of your siblings was honest about how you're really feeling, it produced disconnection. Or maybe you had that relationship with your mom, or maybe you had a sibling that if you were honest about anything negative or not fun, not super positive, that it immediately created disconnection. So you're going back to, where did this start? Where did this fear of being perceived as being difficult, where did that start? And if you can get your head around that, you're going to get clarity on who needs to be forgiven, because there's a part of your heart that needs to know that it is okay to assert my needs sometimes. It's okay to be angry sometimes. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to blow it. It's okay to be learning. It's okay sometimes to let people down. And I need to know that it's not like everybody in my life needs to be able to handle this, but I am looking for at least a small handful of people in my life who love me enough so that I can occasionally blow it and that doesn't immediately produce disconnection. I can be honest about what I really need, and that doesn't produce disconnection. That the relationship is strong enough to be able to handle the truth about me, even if it does cause the other person difficulty, right? Cora and I were just a couple days ago, we were on a long drive and we were reflecting on something, and I was being honest with her about a particular thing, and I'm kind of going, man, it's just me being the way I am, which probably this particular thing, it's not really an issue of character. It's really just an issue of the way I'm wired, the way I'm designed. It's just really frustrating and creates a real challenge for Cora. And everything in me wants to just not be that way. I'm like, man, I can see this is really challenging for you. And so there's, probably a previous version of me would have been tempted to, no, I'm not like that. No, I can adapt. But at this stage of my life, I'm realizing that's actually not the most helpful thing. I really just need to be totally honest. This is actually the truth of how I'm wired, how I think, how I really feel about this situation. And I realize that is going to make things more difficult for Cora. There's she would really love it if that, I know she loves me the way I am, but there's a part, it's like, man, if you were a bit, more like me, or if you were a little different in this area, my life would definitely be easier. And I don't like to sugarcoat that. That's the reality. Hence the need for love and boundaries. And so, but in order to be able to be that honest with her, when I know this is going to create difficulty in her life, I've got to have worked through the fear around that judgment, the fear of being difficult, the fear of letting people down. Okay, who am I accountable to? Number 2, whose judgment am I actually afraid of, right? Who made me feel this way to begin with, or, if you don't like the phrase, who made me feel this way, I'm comfortable with it, to be honest. But if you don't like that, in whose presence did I feel this way initially, right? And going back and getting some healing around that. That's a whole nother topic. Reach out to us if you need some help with getting connected to people who can help you work through healing from stuff from the past, because almost every episode we're diving into, at some point, that's going to be the application. Get healing, right? Because your trauma, your unresolved trauma, is showing up in your current relationship, right? We've got fear, we've got love. Love is what makes the relationship work. Fear is what makes the relationship not work. And when you've got residual, unresolved trauma, then that's creating a real opportunity for fear to fester in the connection, and you don't want to be bringing that into your relationship. Of course, you have brought fear into the relationship. I've got unresolved fear that I'm still working through every day. The goal isn't to get to the point where you absolutely have no fear. Well, ultimately, definitely that's the goal. But the reality we're working through is, it's not like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm going to absolutely have nothing but love in my heart, no fear whatsoever. That's not likely, right? And so it's really about, when fear shows up in me, when anxiety shows up in me, I own it. I do something about it. I'm not asking the people I love to cater to that fear and to moderate themselves around that fear. I'm saying that is my fear, that belongs to me, and it's my job to do something about it. So I'm going to go back and find out, where did that fear start, and I'm going to kick some butt, back in that area of those memories. Okay, next one is, what do I believe about me? Of course, brings the question to the surface. Am I difficult? What do I believe that I'm difficult, right? So if I believe that I am just a difficult person, I am a pain in the butt, if that's what I believe about myself, or if that's what I'm afraid might be true about myself, guess what? Anytime someone treats me in a way that might look like they think that about me, boom, that's like a landmine goes off and they get their leg blown up, right? Because that triggers me massively, because it's like, I already am terrified that that might be true about myself. So I need everybody around me to constantly assure me that I'm not difficult. But what if you are being difficult? You got to own that, right? And so it really, again, what you believe about yourself, that is your belief. That belongs to you, right? There's no one else's to blame for what you believe about yourself. If someone's treated you in a way, maybe someone has told you straight up over and over and over. Let's look at the most extreme example I can think of. You have had someone in your life from early childhood constantly telling you over and over, you are so difficult, you are such a pain in the butt, you make everything harder, right? Maybe you've had that your whole life. I'm here to tell you, friend, if you agree with that, if you have bought into that belief, that is on you, right? The fact that they treated you like that, that is on them. And there needs to be, hopefully you can find the strength to be able to forgive them for that, because that is not cool, right? But if you choose to believe it, that is on you. The moment you own that and say, this is my belief, I have decided to believe, I have chosen to believe. At some point I've bought into this lie that I am just too difficult to be worthy of love. The sooner you own that, the sooner you can actually do something about that and change that belief. So my question for you, okay, you're wrestling with the fear about people perceiving you as being difficult. My question for you, if you were sitting here in my presence and you were telling me that, my first question for you, my first question would be, who are you accountable to? Next one would be, whose judgment are you afraid of? Third question for you would be, are you difficult? What do you believe about yourself? Are you a difficult person? People look at me like, what a rude question. It's like, people, I get this all the time, like, oh, I don't want to look like the bad guy. And I say, well, are you the bad guy? They look at me like, what an awful thing to say. No, I'm not the bad guy. You're the bad guy for asking me that terrible question. I said, well, are you the bad guy? Talk to me. Tell me. Well, no, I don't think I'm the bad guy. Well, you've got to wrestle with that. You've got to get to the bottom of, maybe you are the bad guy in this situation. Maybe you are being abusive and controlling and awful. I don't know. Let's dive into it. But what you believe about yourself in this situation is a big deal, right? The belief that you are coming into, the belief that you are about yourself, that you're bringing into the conversation, that is setting a pretty important foundation for how the conversation is going to go. Because what you're gonna need somebody, because that's awful for your heart, right? To believe that, or in this, to come back to the topic here, if you believe that you are a difficult person, that is that's like a disease in your heart. That's a terrible thing. It's like something sitting in your stomach that shouldn't be there, something lodged in your lung that shouldn't be there. That belief is sitting in your heart, wreaking havoc like a piece of shrapnel left over from the war, and so if that's the case, you're coming into that conversation, you're going to need the other person to behave in a way to medicate that. You're already coming with that pain. I believe I am a difficult person. You're going to need the other person to constantly reassure you you're not being difficult. Everything's fine, or you're going to need to constantly want everybody to know you're not being difficult, you're fine, you've got this, So what do you believe about yourself? When did you start believing that you are a difficult person? What's the time in your life that you caused the most problems for the people you love? Think about it. Think about your whole journey. When were you at your absolute worst? When did you cause the most pain and frustration for people that you genuinely love? And the question is, have you been forgiven for that? First and foremost, have you forgiven yourself? Have you been forgiven by God? Or, that would be my way. That would be my view. Very much believe in a creator, and I'm a follower of Jesus. And so I'm going, am I forgiven by God? For you got to wrestle with that, right? Have you been ultimately forgiven? And ideally, you've actually been forgiven by, the people who you may have caused problems to. But what if you haven't? You're on a treadmill the rest of your whole life until they forgive you? Man, I don't know if you want to give them that much power. So you might need to let yourself off, though. It's our own judgment of ourselves that's often the most paralyzing and debilitating. So you might need to go through a process and making sure that whatever has happened in the past is fully resolved, so that you can come into your current relationships without the baggage of that unresolved stuff. Next up, what do I believe about the current situation? How have I contributed to this situation, to this arrangement, to this conflict? Have I made things right with people who have been impacted by my mistakes? Am I willing to endure being seen as the difficult one in order to fight for a healthier relationship with this person? Right? What do I actually believe about this situation? What is actually healthy? Right? Somebody say, "Oh, I don't want to be the difficult one. I feel like I'm always the difficult one. I don't want to be difficult." I go, "Okay, well, let's look at the situation." Right? Have you been difficult? How have you contributed to the situation? Have you owned your part? Well, yeah, I really feel like I have owned my part. Okay. Well, why do you think something needs to change? Well, because I've experienced this, that, and the other. And I go, okay, well, that's fair enough. That seems pretty reasonable. What's the change? What are your responsibilities in this situation? Who are the people affected by this? Who are the people that need to know what's going on? Well, okay, this person, this person, this person. Okay, gotcha. What's the change that needs to be made? I feel like I just need a couple weeks off. I'm not coping, or I feel like I need to let go of that aspect of my role, or I feel like I feel like until I see this person, until I see my husband make a shift in this particular behavior, I'm going to need a little bit of space in this area, right? And I look at that and go, okay, well, gosh, that seems pretty fair, right? And so you're able to work through getting to the bottom of what do I actually believe about this current situation, and work that out and get help, friends. And that's the other thing. You're going to hear probably every single one of these episodes. At some point, the application is going to be seek help. Man, Cora and I still do this all the time. We're looking for people who we can process with. We have mentors in our lives who can help us navigate through sticky situations, because even though this is our whole lives talking about this stuff, it's still so hard to see through it. When I am in pain, when I am frustrated, it can be very difficult to see the right way forward. And so, yeah, we got to get objective and wise help. And then there's the question, what is more important to me? To prove that I'm stable and I don't need anything from anyone, or to build deep, healthy relationships? If this particular struggle is your struggle, I don't want to look like a difficult person, I don't want to look like I don't have it all together, then this is the question for you. What is more important to you, friend? To prove that you're stable and that you don't need help from anyone, you don't need anything from anybody. Is that more important to you? Or is it building genuine, deep, healthy relationships? Because a genuine, healthy relationship is absolutely 100% going to, at least occasionally, maybe frequently, require you to acknowledge that you need help, that you don't have it all together, that you don't know everything, that you are not absolutely and completely competent, that you bit off more than you can chew, that, I don't know, that you've moved forward in a direction and now need to backtrack, that you've got something wrong, or that something needs an adjustment. You're not as strong as you were hoping that you would be, or whatever. A healthy relationship is definitely going to require that from time to time. So, you're going to need to be able to risk looking like a difficult person sometimes to have a healthy relationship. And of course, lastly, what kind of people do I want to build deep connections with? What do I expect of people who care for me when they perceive that I actually am just being a difficult person, or when they perceive that I, am blowing it, right? What do I expect? And I know the answer for me for this question is I want people to tell me the truth in kindness. I don't want to be blasted. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be accused and rejected, but I want to have a handful of people in my life, at least a handful, who love me enough to be honest with me about my behavior and how it's affecting them and the people around me, right? Those are the kind of relationships I'm really interested in. The kind of relationships where I'm constantly having to manage how everything is perceived, because if I get something wrong, they're not going to be honest with me. They're just going to reject me, ghost me, or get all passive aggressive or aggressive aggressive. That's okay. That's all right. But I'm being pretty honest. That's not the kind of relationship. These are not the kind of people who behave in that way currently. I won't say those kind of people because people change. People behaving that way currently are not the kind of people that I'm looking to build deep, close, healthy relationships with. I can have some level of connection with those kind of people, but those are not the kind of people that I want at the core of my life. I'm looking for people who love me enough to be honest with me and truthful with me, because that means I can get on with being Matt. Isn't that awesome? I love that. I love getting on with being Matt. I don't want to be constantly worried about how everything I do is perceived. I want to have freedom to get on with being me, and to know that when me being me, sometimes occasionally, maybe even frequently, causes someone I love some pain, some frustration, some difficulty, that person is going to communicate with me in love and in kindness and let me know that they would really appreciate it if I would change my behavior, and I get to decide whether or not that's something I want to do. And when we have that kind of thing flowing around us, it just takes the pressure off. I don't have to constantly worry about how everybody's, what everybody's thinking about about everything I do. I can just get on with being me, and I can rest assured that the people who are most important to me are going to be honest with me when that is necessary. Okay, friends, that was episode 4. What if I look like the difficult one? I hope that you found that helpful. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to support you in your journey. Reach out to us if you're interested in jumping in at a deeper level into any of the mentoring programs or the team mentoring programs that we run. Lots of love. See ya.
We hope you found the conversation and stories on today's podcast helpful and insightful. If you want to go deeper, Restoring Connections offers online courses that cover key topics like personal responsibility, proactive care, powerful communication, and healthy boundaries. Go to www.restoringconnections.nz for more information. This podcast is funded by generous supporters from all over the world. Please consider supporting by going to the Restoring Connections website and hitting the Contribute button. By partnering with us, you're helping to provide mentoring, workshops, and training to others who are also restoring their connections.